An eccentric millionaire hires a young virgin to look after his triplets. Although the children are reserved, they slowly warm up to their new nanny. For the woman, being a nanny seemed easy, until she stepped into the millionaire's room. If this story caught your attention, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Standing before the wrought iron gates of the Montgomery estate, Eliza Reed questioned if she was making yet another mistake. The mansion loomed beyond a carefully manicured pathway, its Victorian architecture imposing against the backdrop of Boston's grey autumn sky. She clutched the worn leather satchel containing everything she owned in the world, clothes, a dog-eared paperback, and official documents that reduced her entire existence to serial numbers and foster home placements. "You can still walk away," she whispered to herself, adjusting the simple blazer she'd bought at a thrift store for this interview. But Eliza knew she wouldn't. The advertisement had seemed almost too perfect. Live-in nanny for triplets, exceptional salary, private quarters, health insurance, things that had been luxuries throughout her 26 years of life. The email correspondence had been formal, but encouraging. Her lack of family ties was described as an advantage rather than a liability for once. The intercom crackled when she pressed the button. "Name?" A woman's voice, clipped and precise. "Eliza Reed, I have an appointment with Mr. Montgomery regarding the nanny position." The gates opened with a mechanical whir. As Eliza walked up the curved driveway, she noted security cameras tracking her movement from multiple angles. The grounds were immaculate but eerily quiet. No birds sang, no gardeners worked despite the perfection of the landscape. The massive front door opened before she could knock. A woman in her 60s with steel-grey hair, pulled into a severe bun, stood in the doorway, posture rigid, eyes assessing. "Ms. Reed, I am Mrs. Whitmore, head housekeeper." The woman's gaze swept over Eliza's modest outfit and simple appearance. "You're precisely on time. Mr. Montgomery appreciates punctuality." Eliza followed Mrs. Whitmore into a foyer with marble floors and a crystal chandelier that caught the light streaming through stained glass windows. The housekeeper's keys jingled at her waist with every measured step. "The staff quarters are in the east wing. You won't have occasion to enter the west wing unless specifically instructed. The children's rooms are on the second floor, central corridor. Mr. Montgomery's office and private quarters are on the third floor. You will need clearance to access those areas." Mrs. Whitmore recited these details without turning to look at Eliza. "The grounds are monitored at all times. For security reasons, your phone will have restricted service while on the property." Eliza nodded, trying to memorize the layout. "And the children?" Mrs. Whitmore's pace slowed fractionally. "The Montgomery triplets are 10 years old. They require special attention. Their previous caretakers found them challenging." "How many previous nannies have there been?" Eliza asked. The housekeeper's lips thinned. "That information is unnecessary for your potential position. Mr. Montgomery will discuss what he deems relevant." She stopped before an ornate door. "Wait here. Do not wander." Left alone, Eliza took in her surroundings. Family photographs lined one wall, a handsome man with a serious expression, a beautiful woman with auburn hair, and 3 identical boys at various ages. In the most recent photos, Eliza noticed the woman was absent. The door opened, and Eliza found herself face with the man from the photographs. Nathaniel Montgomery was tall with broad shoulders and deep-set eyes that seemed permanently shadowed. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, and fine lines around his mouth suggested he had once smiled more often. "Ms. Reed." His voice was deep and measured. "Please come in." His office was all dark wood and leather, walls lined with books. A fire crackled in a marble fireplace despite the mild weather outside. "Your resume is thin," he said without preamble, gesturing for her to take a seat across from his desk. "No family references, no long-term employment history. Why should I entrust my children to someone with your background?" Eliza met his gaze directly. "Because I understand what it's like to be a child without stability. I grew up in the system, foster homes, group homes, state facilities. I know what children need, Mr. Montgomery, because I know what I needed and rarely received." Something flickered in his eyes. Interest, perhaps, or recognition of a shared pain. My sons are... He paused, choosing his words carefully. They've experienced trauma. Their mother is no longer with us. They process their grief in different ways. I'd like to meet them, Eliza said. Nathaniel studied her for a long moment. Before we proceed, there are conditions. This position requires absolute discretion. You will sign extensive non-disclosure agreements. The security protocols are non-negotiable. My family values privacy above all else. I understand. Do you? His voice hardened. Because, once you're part of this household, Ms. Reed, there are rules that cannot be broken, areas you cannot access, questions you cannot ask. The warning was clear, but Eliza had survived worse. I'm not afraid of boundaries, Mr. Montgomery. His expression remained unreadable. Then perhaps you should be. He pressed a button on his desk. Mrs. Whitmore will show you to the children. The housekeeper reappeared instantly, as if she'd been listening at the door. They walked in silence up a grand staircase to the second floor. The hallway was lined with closed doors, the carpet muffling their footsteps. The children are in the playroom, Mrs. Whitmore said, stopping before double doors painted a soft blue. I must warn you, they can be. Unusual with new people. The playroom was spacious and filled with books, educational toys and art supplies. 3 identical boys sat in different corners of the room, each engaged in solitary activity. They had their father's dark hair and their absent mother's delicate features. Boys, Mrs. Whitmore announced, this is Miss Reed. She may be your new nanny. None of the children looked up. That's Oliver. Mrs. Whitmore pointed to the boy building an elaborate structure with wooden blocks. Ethan is by the bookshelf, and that's Alexander by the window. Alexander was drawing, his pencil moving rapidly across the paper. Ethan had a book open but didn't appear to be reading it. Oliver continued stacking blocks with mathematical precision. I'll leave you to get acquainted, Mrs. Whitmore said, her tone suggesting she expected failure. The door closed behind her with a decisive click. Eliza approached Oliver first, kneeling beside his construction. That's impressive. What are you building? The boy didn't answer, didn't even acknowledge her presence. His focus remained absolute on the precise placement of each block. She moved to Ethan next, who was holding a book about astronomy. Do you like space? Ethan's eyes flicked to her briefly, then away. He turned a page, but said nothing. Finally, she approached Alexander. He was drawing intricate patterns that seemed strangely familiar. They resembled architectural elements, doorways, windows, corridors. Is that this house? Eliza asked gently. Alexander's hand stilled. Slowly, he raised his head and met her eyes. His gaze was intense, searching. You see it too, he whispered almost inaudibly. Before Eliza could respond, the door opened. Nathaniel Montgomery entered, his presence immediately filling the room. The children tensed visibly. Well? He asked Eliza. She noticed how Alexander quickly covered his drawing with his arm, how Oliver's hands trembled slightly on his blocks, how Ethan seemed to shrink into himself. I'd like to accept the position, Eliza said firmly. When can I start? Nathaniel's eyebrows rose slightly. Most candidates find my sons challenging. Children aren't meant to be easy, Mr. Montgomery. They're meant to be children. She smiled at the boys, though none returned the gesture. I'd like to help, if you'll let me. That evening, Eliza moved into her quarters in the East Wing, a comfortable bedroom with an adjoining sitting room and private bath. The luxury was disorienting after years of shared spaces and minimal privacy. She was unpacking when Mrs. Whitmore appeared with a thick folder. Your contract and non-disclosure agreements. Mr. Montgomery expects them signed by morning. The housekeeper placed them on the desk. The alarm system activates at 10. The kitchen closes at 8. Meals are served promptly. The children's schedule is detailed on page 17. As Mrs. Whitmore turned to leave, Eliza noticed the older woman studying her with an unreadable expression. Was there something else, Mrs. Whitmore? The housekeeper's hand moved to the keys at her waist, fingers tightening around them. The previous nanny asked too many questions, Ms. Reed. This house doesn't welcome curiosity. After the door closed, Eliza sat on the edge of her bed, the contract untouched beside her. Outside her window, darkness had fallen over the grounds. The estate was silent except for the distant sound of a child whispering, too faint to make out the words, too persistent to ignore. She had come seeking a fresh start. But as the whispers continued, Eliza wondered if she had walked into something far more complex than she had bargained for. Still, for the first time in her life, something felt right about being here, as if some invisible thread had drawn her to this place of shadows and secrets. Eliza quickly discovered that routine governed everything in the Montgomery mansion. Each morning began with breakfast at precisely 7 o'clock, served in the children's sunroom overlooking the garden. The triplets ate in silence, arranged in the same seats every day. Mrs. Whitmore supervised the first week, her critical eyes following Eliza's every move. Alexander prefers his toast cut into precise triangles, the housekeeper corrected on the third day. Ethan won't eat if his food touches. Oliver requires exactly 6 ounces of orange juice, no more, no less. The rigidity extended beyond meals. The boys had scheduled lessons, playtimes, and even designated minutes for bathroom breaks. Their lives were regulated with mechanical precision that seemed to both comfort and constrain them. By the second week, Mrs. Whitmore deemed Eliza competent, enough to manage alone, though the housekeeper's omnipresence never truly faded. She appeared in doorways without warning, her keys announcing her approach with their distinctive jingle. Nathaniel Montgomery remained largely absent. He left early each morning for his investment firm in downtown Boston and returned late, occasionally, checking on the children while they slept. Eliza rarely saw him except for brief formal interactions where he inquired about the day's activities with the detachment of a CEO receiving a project update. It was during the third week that Eliza began noticing the patterns. Oliver, the block builder, never spoke, not a single word. His silence wasn't defiance or shyness. He simply didn't communicate verbally. Yet his elaborate constructions grew more complex daily, evolving from simple towers to intricate structures that resembled the mansion itself, complete with hidden passages and rooms that couldn't possibly exist. Ethan whispered to mirrors. The first time Eliza caught him, he was standing before the ornate mirror in the upstairs hallway, lips moving rapidly as he carried on a one-sided conversation with his reflection. When he noticed her watching, he fell silent instantly, color draining from his face. "It's okay," she had said gently. "Who were you talking to?" Ethan had simply shaken his head and walked away. And then there was Alexander, whose drawings fascinated and disturbed Eliza in equal measure. They were always of the house, detailed sketches of rooms and corridors, some that matched the mansion perfectly and others that seemed invented. Yet Alexander drew them with such conviction that Eliza found herself wondering if these imaginary spaces might actually exist somewhere in the sprawling estate. "What's this room?" she asked one afternoon, pointing to a circular chamber Alexander had drawn in what appeared to be the forbidden West Wing. The boy looked at her with those penetrating eyes. "Mom's room," he whispered, "where she watches." A chill ran through Eliza. "Your mom isn't here anymore, Alexander." His expression didn't change. "That's what they want you to think." The conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Whitmore's appearance. The housekeeper's expression tightened when she saw the drawing. "Art." "Time is over," she announced briskly, collecting Alexander's papers despite his silent protest. "Time for mathematics." Later that night, Eliza examined her copy of the floor plans included in her orientation materials. The West Wing contained storage rooms, a conservatory, guest suites, and offices, no circular room. Yet Alexander had drawn it with such precise detail, the curved walls, the bay windows, even the pattern of the drapes. A knock at her door startled her. She quickly slid the papers under a book before answering. "Mr. Montgomery." She stepped back, surprised, to find her employer standing in the hallway. "Ms. Reed." He looked tired, the shadows under his eyes more pronounced than usual. "May I speak with you?" She invited him into her sitting room, suddenly conscious of the modest furnishings compared to the opulence of the main house. How are you finding? Your position? He asked, declining her offer to sit. The boys are remarkable, she answered honestly. Challenging, yes, but remarkable. Something like pride flickered across his face. They've been through more than children their age should endure. They miss their mother, Eliza ventured carefully. Nathaniel's expression closed immediately. My wife's passing was difficult for everyone. I'm sorry for your loss. Eliza hesitated before adding, the children process grief differently. Oliver through silence, Ethan through imaginary conversations, Alexander through his art. You've observed them well. Nathaniel's gaze swept around the room, landing on the partially concealed floor plans. And the house, have you settled in? It's a beautiful home, she said cautiously, though I sometimes feel it has more secrets than rooms. His jaw tightened. All old houses have their quirks, Miss Reed. And their rules, she added. The West Wing remains off limits, I notice. For good reason. His tone was final. My wife's belongings remain undisturbed there. The boys aren't ready to process those memories. Before Eliza could respond, a distant crash echoed through the house. Nathaniel's head snapped toward the sound. The children should be asleep, he said, already moving toward the door. They found Ethan standing before a shattered mirror in the upstairs hallway, blood dripping from his small fist. She won't answer. Any more, the boy was saying, tears streaming down his face. Nathaniel crouched beside his son, gently taking the injured hand. Who won't answer, Ethan? Mom, Ethan whispered, looking at the broken glass. She used to talk to me in the mirrors, but now she's gone. Eliza's heart broke at the raw grief in the child's voice. Nathaniel's face grew ashen as he carefully picked up his son, avoiding the glass shards. I'll take him to clean this up, he said to Eliza. Would you check on the others? She found Oliver still asleep, undisturbed by the commotion. Alexander, however, was sitting up in bed, drawing by the light of a small lamp. Your brother had a bad night, she explained gently, sitting on the edge of his bed. Alexander didn't look up from his paper. He's looking in the wrong places. What do you mean? Mom's not in the mirrors, she's in the walls. His pencil moved across the paper, shading a section of what looked like a hidden passageway. She left clues before she disappeared. Eliza chose her words carefully. Alexander, sometimes when we miss someone very much, we imagine they're still with us. The boy finally looked up, his expression unnervingly adult. I know the difference between real and pretend, Miss Reed. Do you? After getting Alexander back to sleep, Eliza found herself drawn to the broken mirror. Mrs. Whitmore had already swept up the glass, leaving no trace of the incident. The wall where the mirror had hung was bare, except for a faint rectangular outline where dust hadn't settled. Something caught her eye, a small irregularity in the wall's surface. She ran her fingers over it and felt a tiny depression. When she pressed, a nearly imperceptible click sounded, and a small compartment opened in the wall. Inside was a silver locket. With trembling fingers, Eliza opened it to find a miniature photograph of a woman with the same features as the triplets, her auburn hair framing a face that seemed both serene and sad. On the back, engraved in delicate script, were the words, "Remember the Rose Garden." Footsteps approached, the distinctive cadence of Mrs. Whitmore. Eliza quickly pocketed the locket and stepped away from the wall. It's past midnight, Miss. Reed, the housekeeper said, her keys jingling ominously. The hallways are not for wandering after hours. I was checking on the children after the incident, Eliza explained. Mr. Montgomery has sedated Ethan. The boy has episodes when he becomes overexcited about his mother. Sedated? Eliza couldn't keep the concern from her voice. Isn't that extreme for a child? Mrs. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. Mr. Montgomery consulted with physicians after Mrs. Montgomery's accident. The medication prevents Ethan from self-harm during these episodes. What kind of accident? Eliza asked before she could stop herself. That information doesn't concern your duties. Mrs. Whitmore's hand moved to her keys. I suggest you return. To your quarters, Miss Reed. The house can be disorienting at night. The following morning, Eliza found Nathaniel waiting in the breakfast room instead of the children. "The boys will take their meal in the playroom today," he explained, gesturing for her to sit. "I wanted to thank you for your assistance last night." Eliza nodded, studying the man across from her. In the morning light, she noticed details she'd missed before: a scar at his temple partially hidden by his hair, the way his hands seemed perpetually tense, as if bracing for impact. "Ethan's episodes are difficult," Nathaniel continued. "The therapist believes they'll subside as he processes his grief." "And the mirrors?" Eliza asked. "He seems to think his mother communicates through them." Nathaniel's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. "Children create coping mechanisms. Victoria, my wife, used to help the boys get ready in the morning. They would talk to their reflections together, making up stories." Pain flashed across his face. After she was gone, Ethan continued the ritual. "And Oliver's silence? Alexander's drawings?" "Oliver hasn't spoken since the day Victoria disappeared," Nathaniel said quietly. "Alexander was always the artist. His drawings have become more focused since then." Eliza took a chance. "The boys speak as if their mother might return." Nathaniel's expression hardened. "My wife suffered a mental break. She left the house during a snowstorm 2 years ago and was never found. The police presumed she perished in the blizzard, though her body was never recovered." His voice cracked slightly. "The children prefer their version of events." "I'm so sorry," Eliza said, fighting the urge to reach for his hand. Their eyes met, and for a moment Nathaniel's carefully maintained facade cracked, revealing raw grief underneath. The connection was brief but intense. Recognition between two people who understood loss intimately. The spell broke when Mrs. Whitmore entered with a telephone. "Mr. Montgomery, your lawyer is holding. He says it's urgent, regarding the anniversary paperwork." Nathaniel stood abruptly. "Excuse me, Ms. Reed. Please see to the children." In the playroom, Eliza found the triplets engaged in their usual solitary activities, though something seemed different. They exchanged glances when she entered, a silent communication passing between them. "Would you like to go outside today?" she suggested. "The rose garden must be beautiful this time of year." 3 heads snapped up in perfect unison. "We're not allowed in the rose garden," Alexander said. Ethan, his hand bandaged from the previous night, added in a whisper, "That's where Mum was last seen." Oliver remained silent, but he pushed forward a block structure he'd been building. Eliza recognized it immediately, a perfect miniature replica of a garden gazebo. The message was clear. The children were trying to tell her something, and somehow Eliza felt certain that the rose garden held answers to questions she hadn't even formulated yet. That night, after the children were asleep, Eliza stood at her window overlooking the darkened grounds. In the distance, she could make out the silhouette of the rose garden, a perfectly circular arrangement with what appeared to be a gazebo at its center. The locket felt heavy in her pocket. She took it out, studying the woman's face again. Victoria Montgomery had the same intense eyes as her son's, eyes that seemed to be saying, "Look deeper, find me." A floorboard creaked behind her. Eliza turned quickly, but her room was empty. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, a sensation that had grown stronger with each passing day in the Montgomery mansion. Outside, a security light flickered on, illuminating a figure standing at the edge of the rose garden. Eliza pressed closer to the window, trying to make out details. It appeared to be Nathaniel, motionless among the shadows, staring at the gazebo as if it might suddenly reveal its secrets. As she watched, Mrs. Whitmore appeared beside him, her keys glinting in the security light. Words were exchanged, tense from their body language. Then Nathaniel handed something to the housekeeper before walking back toward the house, shoulders bowed as if carrying an invisible weight. Eliza stepped back from the window, heart racing. Whatever secrets the Montgomery mansion held, they were beginning to surface, like bodies rising from the depths of still water. Over the next few weeks, Eliza felt a subtle shift in the household's atmosphere. The children began to open up. Small gestures at first, then more significant breakthroughs. Oliver started leaving his block creations for her to find, elaborate structures that seemed to be communicating something she couldn't quite decipher. Ethan spoke more frequently, though, still in whispers and rarely about his mother. Alexander continued his drawings, but now left them conspicuously visible, as if wanting her to see specific details. Even more surprising was the change in Nathaniel Montgomery. He began returning home earlier, joining them for dinner twice a week. His questions about the children grew more personal, less clinical. Occasionally, Eliza caught him watching her with an expression that wasn't entirely professional. One evening in late October, as rain lashed against the windows, Nathaniel invited Eliza to his study after the children were asleep. "The boys seem better," he said, pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. "Ethan mentioned enjoying his science lesson today. That's the first positive comment he's made about anything in months." Eliza accepted the offered drink, careful to maintain a professional distance despite the intimacy of the setting. "They're extraordinary children, Mr. Montgomery. They just need someone to listen, even to what they don't say." "Nathaniel," he corrected, settling into a leather armchair opposite her. "After 2 months, I think we can dispense with formalities, at least in private." The firelight cast shadows across his face, softening the hard lines of worry that had become so familiar. In this light, Eliza could see traces of the man he must have been before tragedy reshaping his life. Younger, less guarded, perhaps, even capable of spontaneous joy. "Tell me about yourself, Eliza," he said, his voice lower than usual. "Your file contains facts, but reveals little about who you really are." She stared into her glass. "There isn't much to tell. I was abandoned. As an infant, raised in various state facilities. I aged out of the system at 18, worked multiple jobs to put myself through community college. My life has been transient. Yet you connect with my sons in ways no one else has managed since their mother." He trailed off, taking a long sip of his drink. "Children who've experienced trauma recognize it in others," she said simply. Nathaniel's eyes met hers with startling intensity. "And what do you see when you look at me, Eliza?" The question hung between them, charged with undertones neither was prepared to acknowledge. "Someone trying to hold together fragments of a shattered world," she answered honestly. He nodded slowly, then set down his glass and rose. "Come with me. There's something I want to show you." They climbed to the 3rd floor, past his bedroom to a smaller room at the end of the hallway. Nathaniel unlocked the door with a key from his pocket, rather than requesting one from Mrs. Whitmore's omnipresent collection. Inside was what appeared to be a private study. Unlike the formal office downstairs, this space felt personal. Bookshelves filled with well-worn volumes, comfortable furniture, photographs covering one wall. "Victoria's sanctuary," he explained, voice tight with emotion. "No one comes here but me, and now you." Eliza moved carefully through the space, aware of the privilege being extended. The photographs documented the family's history: Nathaniel and Victoria's wedding, the triplets' birth, holidays, ordinary moments preserved in time. Victoria Montgomery's smile was radiant in every image, her eyes bright with intelligence and warmth. "She was beautiful," Eliza said softly. "Brilliant, too. Victoria was a child psychologist before the boys were born." Nathaniel ran his fingers along the spines of books on a nearby shelf. "Her specialty was childhood trauma and resilience. The irony doesn't escape me." A framed diploma caught Eliza's attention, from the same university that had appeared in the photographs in her welcome package. "She studied at Cambridge." "We both did. It's where we met." Nathaniel smiled faintly at the memory. "I was studying business. She was pursuing her doctorate in psychology." Eliza's attention was drawn to a photo she hadn't noticed before, partially hidden behind others. Victoria stood before a brick building with a sign reading, "New Beginnings." "Children's home." Her heart stuttered. She knew that building, that sign, that entrance. What was she doing there? Eliza asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. Nathaniel followed her gaze. Victoria volunteered at several children's homes. She was passionate about improving conditions in the foster care system. He studied Eliza's face carefully. "Does it look familiar to you?" I spent time in a place like that," she deflected, unwilling to acknowledge the growing suspicion forming in her mind. They all look similar after a while. Before he could press further, a crash echoed from downstairs, followed by a child's cry. They found Ethan in the hallway outside the Triplets' rooms. Mrs. Whitmore crouched beside him. A vase lay shattered on the floor. He was sleepwalking. "Again," the housekeeper explained, her tone accusatory as if Eliza should have prevented this. Nathaniel lifted his son, murmuring gentle reassurances. Over his shoulder, Ethan's eyes locked with Eliza's, fully alert, not disoriented as a sleepwalker should be. "He said he saw her again," Mrs. Whitmore added quietly to Nathaniel. "We may need to adjust his medication." Later that night, unable to sleep, Eliza removed the locket from its hiding place beneath her mattress. "Remember the rose garden," the inscription read. She had been avoiding the garden despite her initial curiosity, partly because of the clear prohibition, but also because of the increasing sense that whatever answers lay there might change everything. A soft knock at her door startled her. She quickly concealed the locket and opened the door to find Alexander standing in the hallway clutching a drawing. "You should have this," he whispered, thrusting the paper into her hands before disappearing back toward his room. The drawing showed the rose garden gazebo with meticulous detail, the latticed walls, the peaked roof, the circular foundation. But Alexander had depicted something else, a trap door in the gazebo floor and stairs leading downward to what appeared to be a room with file cabinets. The following day brought an unexpected development. As Eliza supervised the Triplets' afternoon lessons, Mrs. Whitmore appeared with a visitor, a sharp-featured man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Lawrence Harrington, the family attorney. "Mr. Montgomery asked me to review some paperwork while he's in meetings downtown," he explained smoothly. "Mrs. Whitmore suggested I might observe the children while I'm here." Something in his calculating gaze made Eliza uncomfortable. He watched the boys with analytical detachment, making occasional notes in a leather-bound portfolio. "They seem well-adjusted considering," he commented to Eliza as the children worked on their mathematics. "The last time I visited, the quiet one, Oliver, was having episodes." "Episodes?" Eliza asked. "Screaming fits, inconsolable for hours." Harrington's mouth twitched. Mrs. Whitmore had to restrain him, quite distressing for everyone. Eliza glanced at Oliver, now calmly solving equations with methodical precision. The image of this gentle child screaming while being restrained by the severe housekeeper sent a chill through her. "That hasn't happened during my tenure," she said carefully. "Indeed." Harrington's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Your predecessors had less. Beneficial effects on the household dynamics." "There have been many nannies?" Eliza asked, seizing the opportunity. "4 in the past 2 years." He studied her reaction. "None lasted more than a few months. Children with trauma require special handling, as I'm sure you understand from your own background." The deliberate mention of her past made Eliza's skin prickle. "My background?" "Mr. Montgomery is thorough in his vetting process." Harrington closed his portfolio with a snap. "New Beginnings Children's Home, wasn't it? Among others. Quite the coincidence." Before she could respond, Mrs. Whitmore called Harrington away for a phone call. The housekeeper shot Eliza a warning look before leading the attorney from the room. That evening, Eliza discovered a plain envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a newspaper clipping dated 18 months earlier. "Local children's home closed amid adoption scandal." The article detailed allegations of forged paperwork and children placed with families without proper vetting. New Beginnings Children's Home, where Eliza had spent 3 years as a teenager, had been shuttered following the investigation. A handwritten note accompanied the clipping. "Some questions are dangerous. Ask yourself why you're really here." The unsigned warning sent a chill through her. She locked her door that night but found sleep elusive. When she finally drifted off, her dreams were fragmented. Mirrors that showed different reflections than they should. Corridors that led nowhere, and Victoria Montgomery's face, mouthing words Eliza couldn't hear. A thunderstorm woke her just after midnight. Through the rain-streaked window, lightning illuminated the garden and a small figure moving toward the rose gazebo. Eliza recognized Alexander's silhouette immediately. Grabbing a raincoat, she hurried downstairs, disabling the security system with the code she'd been trusted with for emergencies. The rain soaked her within seconds as she ran across the lawn. "Alexander!" she called over the storm's roar. The boy had reached the gazebo and was kneeling on its floor, fingers working at something Eliza couldn't see. She left something for "Sus," Alexander said when she reached him, rainwater streaming down his face. "I wasn't sure until I saw your locket." Eliza froze. "How did you know about that?" "I see things others don't." The boy's matter-of-fact tone was eerie in the storm-dark garden. "Like I see that you've been here before when you were little. You just don't remember." A trapdoor in the gazebo floor was now visible, matching Alexander's drawing perfectly. Beneath it, stone steps descended into darkness. "Alexander, we need to go back to the house," Eliza urged, suddenly afraid of what they might discover. "Too late," the boy whispered, pointing behind her. Eliza turned to see Mrs. Whitmore standing at the garden's entrance, her ever-present keys glinting in another flash of lightning. Beside her was Nathaniel, his expression unreadable in the darkness. "I told Mr. Montgomery you'd become a problem," the housekeeper said coldly. "Just like the others." Rain pounded against the gazebo's roof as Eliza stood frozen between Alexander and the approaching figures. The boy pressed closer to her side, his small hand finding hers in the darkness. "I've tried to be patient," Mrs. Whitmore said, her voice barely audible above the storm. "I warned Mr. Montgomery that your curiosity would become problematic." Nathaniel stepped forward, rainwater streaming down his face. "Eliza, take Alexander back to the house. Now?" She hesitated, torn between obedience and the answers that might lie below the trapdoor. "Nathaniel, what's down there?" "That's none of your concern," Mrs. Whitmore interjected sharply. "Your contract explicitly forbids unauthorized exploration of the grounds." Lightning flashed, illuminating the scene in stark relief. Alexander's determined face, Mrs. Whitmore's rigid posture, and, most disturbingly, Nathaniel's expression of conflicted anguish. "Alexander shouldn't be out in this storm," Eliza said, finally, choosing the child's safety over her growing suspicions. "I'll take him." Back. She guided Alexander toward the house, feeling Mrs. Whitmore's eyes boring into her back. As they passed Nathaniel, he spoke in a low voice meant only for her. "My study, after he's settled." The household was eerily quiet when they returned, despite the storm's continued assault. Eliza helped Alexander change into dry clothes, noting how the boy avoided her questions about what he'd been searching for. "You'll understand soon," was all he would say before climbing into bed. She found Ethan and Oliver still asleep, or pretending to be in their rooms. As she closed Oliver's door, she noticed a folded piece of paper that had been pushed under it from the inside. The note, written in a child's careful script, contained just 3 words. "Trust no one." Her hands trembling, Eliza made her way to Nathaniel's study. The door stood ajar, warm light spilling into the darkened corridor. Inside, Nathaniel stood with his back to her, a glass of whiskey in one hand, staring at a portrait of Victoria that hung above the fireplace. "You should pack your things," he said without turning. "Mrs. Whitmore has arranged for a car to take you to the city in the morning." The words hit her like a physical blow. "You're firing me." He turned then, his expression haunted. "I'm protecting you, Eliza. There are aspects of this situation you don't understand." "Then help me understand," she pleaded, stepping closer. "The children trust me. They're making progress. Alexander sought me out tonight because he believes I can help." "Alexander is a troubled child who blurs fantasy and reality," Nathaniel said, though his voice lacked conviction. "He's been fixated on the gazebo since his mother disappeared. The psychiatrist believes it's a manifestation of his grief, creating mystery where there is only tragedy." "And the trapdoor. Was that his imagination too?" Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "That area of the estate is structurally unsound. It's been sealed off for safety reasons." You're lying, Eliza said softly, just as you've been lying about why I'm really here. His eyes widened slightly. What do you mean? She reached into her pocket and withdrew the locket. I found this, hidden in the wall where Ethan's mirror used to hang. It's your wife's, isn't it? The inscription mentions the rose garden. Nathaniel's hand shook as he took the locket, his fingers tracing the engraving. Where did you— And there's more, Eliza continued, emboldened by his reaction. The photograph of Victoria at New Beginnings Children's Home. That wasn't random charity work, was it? She was looking for someone specific. Nathaniel sank into his chair, suddenly looking defeated. You've been investigating. No, Eliza shook her head. The pieces have been falling into my lap. The children are trying to tell me something. About your wife, about this house, about why I'm here. Why? Do you think you're here? He asked quietly. Eliza took a deep breath. Because I spent 3 years at New Beginnings. Because your wife was searching for a child to adopt before she disappeared. Because your sons recognize me somehow. She met his gaze directly. Because I've had dreams about this place since I arrived. Dreams that feel like memories. Nathaniel was silent for a long moment, studying her face with newfound intensity. You were 11 when Victoria first saw you, he finally said. She was conducting a psychological assessment of children in the system. She came home that night and couldn't stop talking about this extraordinary girl with resilience that defied her circumstances. Eliza's heart pounded. She wanted to adopt me? We had started the process, Nathaniel confirmed. The paperwork was underway when you were suddenly transferred to another facility. Victoria was devastated. She tried to track you down, but it was as if you'd vanished from the system. I was moved 7 times in 2 years, Eliza said, memories flooding back. I remember a woman with auburn hair who brought me books. She promised— Her voice caught. She promised I wouldn't have to move again. Victoria kept searching, Nathaniel continued. Even after the triplets were born, she never forgot you. When she discovered irregularities in adoption records, at New Beginnings, she began investigating privately. And then she disappeared, Eliza whispered. The official story is that she wandered off during a snowstorm, disoriented from medication she was taking for postpartum depression. Nathaniel's voice was hollow. The police investigation concluded she was lost in the blizzard. But you don't believe that, Eliza said, understanding dawning. Victoria wasn't taking medication. She wasn't depressed. She was excited because she'd discovered something about the adoption records. He rubbed his face wearily. The night before she disappeared, she told me she was close to exposing a network of illegal adoptions, children being placed with families who paid substantial fees to bypass the system. And the trapdoor in the gazebo? Victoria used the gazebo as a private office. She didn't trust keeping sensitive information in the house. Nathaniel's expression darkened. After she disappeared, I found the space empty, all her files gone. The implications were staggering. You think someone took her research, and Victoria. I've spent 2 years trying to piece together what she found, Nathaniel said. The boys have been my priority, but I've never stopped looking. What does Mrs. Whitmore have to do with this? Eliza asked, remembering the housekeeper's threatening presence. Nathaniel hesitated. Helen Whitmore was Victoria's maternal aunt. She moved in to help with the boys after Victoria disappeared. She's been protective of the family. Protective or controlling? Eliza challenged. The security measures, the medication, the isolation. These children are prisoners in their own home. It's complicated, Nathaniel said, standing abruptly. The boys exhibit behaviors that require structure. The doctors have recommended— What doctors? Eliza interrupted. The same ones who claimed Victoria was on medication she wasn't taking. The question hung in the air between them, unanswered. Outside, the storm had quieted, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. I hired you because I recognized your name from Victoria's papers, Nathaniel finally admitted. I needed to know if you were connected to her research somehow, if you might know something without realizing it. You've been using me, Eliza said, hurt despite understanding his desperation. At first, he acknowledged, but then I saw how you connected with the boys, how they responded to you in ways they haven't with anyone since Victoria, and I began to hope that maybe you were meant to be here, to help us find answers." A soft knock interrupted them. The cellar opened to reveal Oliver, the silent child, standing in the threshold with wide, frightened eyes. In his hands was a small recorder. "Oliver?" Nathaniel moved toward his son. "What's wrong?" The boy didn't respond verbally, but he pressed a button on the device. A woman's voice, cultured, urgent, filled the room. "Nate, if you're hearing, something's happened to me. The records lead back to Harrington's firm. They've been facilitating illegal adoptions for years. Helen is involved. She's been monitoring our communications. The girl from New Beginnings, Eliza, her file, was falsified. She wasn't abandoned. She was taken. I've hidden the evidence in the only place Helen doesn't know about. The children will remember. Trust them, not—" The recording cut off abruptly. Oliver looked up at his father with tears streaming down his face. "Where did you find this?" Nathaniel asked, his voice shaking. Oliver pointed upward, then made a gesture like opening a book. "In Victoria's study," Eliza guessed. "Inside a book?" The boy nodded. "Oliver's been collecting evidence," came Alexander's voice from the doorway where he stood with Ethan. "We all have. Mom showed us her secret places before she went away. She said if anything happened to her, we should wait for the girl in the photograph." "What photograph?" Eliza asked gently. Ethan stepped forward, holding out a worn picture. It showed a young Eliza, perhaps 11 years old, sitting on a bench beside Victoria Montgomery. They were laughing about something, the connection between them palpable, even in the faded image. "She said you'd come back for us," Ethan whispered. "That you were going to be our sister." The revelation struck Eliza like a physical blow. Fragmented memories surfaced, a woman with kind eyes choosing books for her, discussions about a new home, hopes cautiously nurtured, then abruptly shattered. When she was transferred without explanation. "I remember her," Eliza said, tears welling in her eyes. "I remember feeling safe with her." Nathaniel looked from the children to Eliza, his expression transforming from shock to determination. "We need to get into that underground room tonight." "What about Mrs. Whitmore?" Eliza asked. "She takes a sleeping pill every night at 10, Alexander said with the matter-of-factness of a child who has observed adults carefully. "She won't wake up until morning." "And the security system?" Nathaniel asked his son, clearly surprised by the boy's knowledge. "Mom showed us how to bypass it," Ethan explained, "in case we ever needed to escape." The implications of Victoria preparing her children for potential danger in their own home sent a chill through Eliza. "If we're doing this, we need to be careful," she said. "If Victoria was right about Harrington and Mrs. Whitmore being involved in something illegal, we could be in danger." "We're already in danger," Nathaniel said grimly. "We have been since Victoria disappeared." The 4 children, 3 by birth and 1 who might have been, exchanged looks of understanding. Whatever they discovered tonight would change everything. Armed with flashlights and Nathaniel's master key, they made their way silently through the sleeping house. The rain had stopped, but water still dripped from trees and eaves, creating a gentle percussion in the darkness. At the gazebo, Nathaniel lifted the trap door while Eliza and the boys kept watch. The opening revealed stone steps descending into darkness just as Alexander had drawn. "Stay close," Nathaniel instructed as they descended into the cool, damp space below. What they found was not a room, but a tunnel, brick-lined and stretching into darkness. Eliza's flashlight revealed scuff marks on the floor indicating recent use. "This connects to the west wing," Nathaniel realized aloud. The original house had escape tunnels built during Prohibition. They followed the passage in tense silence, until reaching a metal door. It opened with Nathaniel's key, revealing a small room filled with filing cabinets and a desk covered in papers. "Victoria's research," Nathaniel breathed, moving toward the desk. Eliza examined the files while Nathaniel searched the desk. The cabinets contained hundreds of adoption records spanning decades, all from New Beginnings and similar facilities across 3 states. "These are all falsified," she said, scanning the documents. "Birth certificates with fake names, medical records created after the fact, court orders signed by the same judge over and over. Look at this." Nathaniel called, holding up a ledger. Payment records, hundreds of thousands of dollars changing hands for each child. Alexander tugged at Eliza's sleeve, pointing to a cabinet she hadn't opened yet. Inside was a single red folder labeled with her name. With trembling hands, she opened it to find her original birth certificate, not the amended version she'd grown up believing was real. According to this document, she wasn't abandoned at a hospital. She had been born to a woman named Rebecca Marshall, who had supposedly died in childbirth. She was investigating my case, Eliza murmured, scanning the meticulous notes Victoria had made. She found out my mother didn't die. She was told I was stillborn while she was unconscious after a difficult delivery. They took you from her, Nathaniel said quietly, and sold you into the system. There are dozens of cases like mine, Eliza said, gesturing to the files. Victoria was building evidence against an entire network. But who's behind it? Nathaniel asked, rifling through papers. A voice from the doorway answered, You should have left well enough alone, Nathaniel. They turned to find Mrs. Whitmore standing there, a gun held steadily in her hand. Behind her loomed Lawrence Harrington, his eyes cold. The children should go back to bed, Mrs. Whitmore said with chilling calm. This is an adult matter. The Sitima underground room fell silent, save for the distant drip of water. Eliza instinctively moved in front of the children, her eyes fixed on the gun in Mrs. Whitmore's steady hand. Helen, Nathaniel said carefully, think about what you're doing. I've thought about nothing else for 2 years, the housekeeper replied, her aristocratic features hardening. Victoria should have left it alone. The system works. Everyone benefits. Except the children who were stolen from their families, Eliza challenged, anger overriding her fear. Except the parents who were lied to. Harrington stepped forward, his expensive shoes clicking on the stone floor. It's more nuanced than that, Ms. Reed. These children went to wealthy homes, received excellent educations, opportunities they would never have had otherwise. You stole them, Nathaniel said, his voice shaking with rage. You forged documents, bribed officials, destroyed families, all for profit. For order, Mrs. Whitmore corrected. The right children with the right families. Victoria didn't. Understand the bigger picture. Alexander's small voice cut through the tension. Where's our mum? Mrs. Whitmore's expression softened marginally as she looked at the child. Your mother made a critical error in judgment, Alexander. She threatened to expose a system that has successfully placed hundreds of children in appropriate homes. You. Todd didn't answer his question, Ethan said, stepping beside his brother. Harrington checked his watch impatiently. This is becoming tedious. The practical matters need addressing. Nathaniel, we've prepared papers transferring guardianship of the boys temporarily to Helen, while you seek treatment for your obvious psychological break. Treatment, Nathaniel repeated incredulously. Your grief has finally overwhelmed you, Harrington explained with practiced sympathy. You've been imagining conspiracies. Neglecting your business, fixating on your wife's unfortunate passing, the board is concerned. Eliza suddenly understood. You're going to commit him, take the children, control the Montgomery fortune. The estate will be managed prudently until the boys come of age, Harrington confirmed, with Helen as their guardian and myself as trustee. And me? Eliza asked, already guessing the answer. Mrs. Whitmore's thin smile was chilling. You'll be returning to the system, I'm afraid. With your history of psychological instability and these new delusions about adoption conspiracies, you'll likely require specialized care. Oliver, who had remained silent as always, suddenly moved. With deliberate purpose, he walked to a filing cabinet and pulled out a plastic bag containing a woman's scarf, silk, flecked with dried blood. What are you doing with that? Mrs. Whitmore snapped. Put it back. But Oliver continued toward Harrington, holding out the evidence with unwavering determination. Oliver, stop this instant, the housekeeper commanded. The boy ignored her, his eyes locked on Harrington's increasingly uncomfortable face. That's Victoria's scarf, Nathaniel said slowly, recognition dawning. She was wearing it the night she disappeared. This is ridiculous, Harrington scoffed. The child is clearly disturbed. He knows, Eliza realized aloud. Oliver saw what happened to Victoria. The attorney's facade cracked slightly. This has gone far enough. Helen, get the children upstairs, while I deal with these two. Yes, Mrs. Whitmore agreed, reaching for Alexander with her free hand. Come along, boys. But Alexander backed away. You hurt our mother, he said, his voice trembling. In the West Wing study, Oliver saw you. I saw everything, came a small voice that stunned them all. Oliver, silent for 2 years, had spoken. Mom found the evidence, he continued, each word deliberate and clear. She confronted them in the study. Mrs. Whitmore pushed her. She fell against the marble fireplace. The room froze in collective shock, not just at the revelation but at hearing Oliver's voice after years of silence. She hit her head, the boy continued, tears streaming down his face. There was so much blood. I was hiding in the secret passage. Mom had shown me all the hiding places in case the bad people ever came. Mrs. Whitmore's composure fractured. That's absurd. Victoria left during the snowstorm. The police investigation confirmed. The police investigation that Harrington's brother-in-law oversaw, Nathaniel challenged, advancing on the housekeeper. Despite the gun. The search that conveniently focused on the woods instead of the property. Don't come any closer, Mrs. Whitmore warned, the gun wavering slightly. Eliza caught Ethan's eye and gave him a barely perceptible nod. The boy understood immediately, sliding slowly toward the door while everyone's attention remained on the confrontation. You killed her, Nathaniel continued, his voice breaking. My wife, your own niece, and you've been drugging my children to keep them quiet. They were hysterical, Mrs. Whitmore defended herself. The doctor agreed sedation was necessary. Over time, they simply forgot, or chose not to remember. We remembered everything, Alexander said fiercely. We just waited for the right time for her. He pointed at Eliza. Mrs. Whitmore's attention shifted to Eliza, her expression hardening. Victoria's pet project. She was obsessed with finding. You convinced your case would break open the entire network. And it will, Eliza said with quiet conviction. Victoria left evidence, not just here, but with people you don't know about, journalists, officials. You're bluffing, Harrington snapped. There's nothing that can't be explained away. A new voice joined the conversation from the tunnel entrance. I wouldn't be so sure about that, Lawrence. Everyone turned to see Detective Marcus Chen, standing in the doorway, gun drawn and badge visible. Behind him stood several uniformed officers. Boston PD, he announced calmly. Everyone stay where they are. Mrs. Whitmore's hand trembled. This is a private family matter. Drop the weapon, ma'am, Chen ordered firmly. For a tense moment, Eliza feared the housekeeper might choose violence over surrender, but something in Mrs. Whitmore seemed to deflate, and she carefully placed the gun on the floor. As officers moved in to secure Harrington and Mrs. Whitmore, Chen approached Nathaniel. We got a call from a very articulate young man who said his family was in danger. He nodded toward Ethan, who stood by the tunnel entrance. Relief washed over Eliza as she gathered the triplets close. You did it, she whispered to Ethan. You saved us all. We knew you'd help us find the truth, Alexander replied. Mom said you would. The next hours passed in a blur of police statements, evidence collection, and medical examinations for the children. By dawn, Mrs. Whitmore and Harrington were in custody, facing charges of homicide, conspiracy, fraud, and child trafficking. Detective Chen explained that Victoria's case had been reopened 6 months earlier, based on anonymous tips, likely from the triplets sending out clues from their closely monitored home. The boys had been carefully gathering evidence since their mother's disappearance, waiting for the right ally to help them expose the truth. Your wife's body was found in a walled-off section of the West Wing, Chen told Nathaniel gently as they sat in the kitchen while forensic teams worked through the house. It appears they concealed her there after the incident. Nathaniel nodded numbly, grief and validation warring across his face. She never left us, he murmured. All this time, she was still here. The boys seemed to know, Eliza said softly. Their behaviors, Alexander's drawings of hidden rooms, Ethan talking to mirrors near where she was concealed, Oliver's silence. They were processing trauma in the only ways they could. Chen nodded. Children are more perceptive than we give them credit for. These three are exceptional, though, the evidence they collected, the way they communicated through codes and drawings. They never gave up on finding justice for their mother. 2 weeks later, as autumn gave way to early winter, the Montgomery estate began its slow healing process. Victoria had been properly laid to rest in a private ceremony. Mrs. Whitmore and Harrington faced multiple grand jury indictments, along with several judges, doctors, and administrators implicated in their scheme. Eliza stood in the rose garden, now dormant for the season, watching as Nathaniel supervised the triplets playing a rare game of tag across the lawn. The boys laughed openly now, even Oliver, whose voice grew stronger each day as he reclaimed his long-surrendered speech. "They're different children," Nathaniel said, joining her by the gazebo. "Thanks to you." "They saved themselves," Eliza replied. "They just needed someone to believe them." He took her hand gently, an intimacy that had been growing between them as they navigated the aftermath together. "The detective called this morning. They've located Rebecca Marshall, your birth mother." Eliza's heart skipped. "Is she—" "Alive, living in Seattle. She never stopped looking for you, apparently." Nathaniel squeezed her hand. "They've arranged a video call for tomorrow, if you're ready." Tears welled in Eliza's eyes. "After all this time, I don't even know what to say to her." "You'll find the words," he assured her, "just as you did with us." A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the children chase each other across the grounds that had once felt like a prison and now, finally, resembled a home. "I've been offered a teaching position at Boston University," Eliza said finally, "starting next semester." Nathaniel turned to her, concern crossing his features. "You're leaving?" "I thought it might be for the best. The boys are healing. They need space to process everything that's happened." "They need you," Nathaniel said quietly. "We need you." Eliza met his gaze. "Is that what you want, after everything that's happened in this house?" "What happened here wasn't love or family. It was control disguised as protection." His hand rose to gently touch her cheek. "Victoria brought you into our lives for a reason. She saw in you what I see now. Strength, compassion, resilience. The boys adore you." "And you?" Eliza asked, her heart pounding. "I'm not offering you a job anymore, Eliza." His voice was soft but certain. "I'm asking you to consider being part of this family, however that might look, whatever time it takes. No contracts, no conditions, just possibility." Before she could respond, Oliver appeared beside them, slightly breathless from playing. "Are you going to be our mum now?" he asked with a child's directness. Eliza knelt to his level. "I don't think I could ever replace your mother, Oliver. She was extraordinary." "Not replace," the boy clarified seriously. "Mom said families can grow in different ways. Like how you were supposed to be our sister, and now you're something else." Alexander and Ethan joined them, forming a small circle of hopeful faces. "We found this," Ethan said, holding out a sealed envelope. "In Mum's study. It has your name on it." With trembling fingers, Eliza opened it to find a letter written in elegant script. "My dear Eliza, if you're reading this, you've found your way back to us, just as I always believed you would. When I first met you as a child, I recognized something familiar in your spirit, a resilience that comes from navigating darkness without losing sight of light. Sorry, I don't know what circumstances have brought you into our lives again, but I trust they are part of a larger design. The boys will need your strength, Nathaniel will need your compassion, and perhaps you'll find what you've been searching for as well, a place to belong, not as someone's employee or charge, but as family. Trust yourself. Trust the children. Remember that family isn't only made by blood or document. It's created through choice, reinforced through love, and sustained through truth. With hope and affection, Victoria Montgomery. Tears streamed down Eliza's face as the words connected past to present, closing a circle that had been opened years before. She knew, Eliza whispered, looking at the faces surrounding her. Nathaniel and the three extraordinary boys who had fought so hard for truth. Somehow she knew we'd find each other again. Mom always said things happen for a reason, Alexander stated with certainty. Even the bad things? Eliza asked gently. Especially those, Nathaniel said, helping her to her feet. They showed us what we're capable of surviving, what we can overcome together. As the winter sun cast long shadows across the estate that had witnessed so much, darkness and was now finally stepping into light, Eliza made her choice. Not to flee as she had so many times before, but to stay, to build something new from the fragments of what was broken. Because family, as Victoria had written, wasn't made by blood or document. It was created through choice, reinforced through love and sustained through truth. And for the first time in her life, Eliza Reid had found all three. Dear listeners, we hope you've been touched by Eliza's journey from isolation to belonging at the Montgomery estate. For more emotionally captivating stories that explore the depths of family secrets and redemption, we've created a special playlist you can find by clicking on the link to your left. If this story moved you, please subscribe to our channel and leave a like on this video. Every day we bring you unique narratives that examine the complexities of human connection and resilience. Don't miss our upcoming